Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to a Wednesday night webinar. My name is Connor Marshall from Global Wealth Club. Today, I'm very lucky to be joined by at least one out of the two gentlemen so far, Stephen Pettith. How are you today, mate? Oh, we had Stephen for a second. It's quickly gone now. We'll give Stephen a second to come back to it. It's great to see so many familiar names in the chat and also some new names. There we go. Stephen, we're back.
I'm back.
Excellent, mate. How have you been today?
Yeah, I'm good. Good.
Flat
out. Which is always, we're doing well.
If anything otherwise, mate, I'd be a little bit worried.
Yeah, me too. Just had a big storm roll through Brisbane Vegas here. So we just caught the outskirts of it, just looking outside. There's no lightning anymore. But yeah, no, it was cool.
That's good. So that's the last thing we need with challenging conditions. It looks like Warren's ready for all types of weather with that hat on.
Yes, yeah.
We're going to be true blue Aussie here.
Warren like balls on his head.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm going to be true blue Aussie.
Well, it's much better than the wizard hat. I'll give you that for Warren.
It's just another form of being, looking sexy, the good old true blue bushman.
And I think you got it on backwards by the looks of it too.
Oh, who knows? Maybe I do. Let's just try.
What's the term, Stephen? It's all the gear and no idea, isn't it?
Exactly. That's it, mate.
At least it's only about the top part, not the bottom part. That's what most important. Remember that.
Oh, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. So, Stephen and Warren, we've got an interesting thing to discuss today. It's been a pretty hot topic over the last few weeks, and that is, of course, the new super laws that they've brought in regarding the taxation of super. So I'm going to open this up to both of you and ask, are these developments anything surprising to either of you, or is this something you've both expected to start unfolding for a while now?
Oh, gosh. I'll start. Do you want to start, Stephen, or me?
There you go, mate. I'll let you start.
All I was going to say is that Steve and I have been saying this. For me, I'm surprised how long it took. To me, there's a huge kitty. There's a lot of money. Governments are running out of money. I'm just kind of curious how it will play out. I mean, my biggest thing I was saying today to someone, and I know Stephen's going to agree with me on this, is I'm like, really, people get car insurance because they're concerned about their car getting crashed. People are concerned about health, so they get health insurance. But then most people just don't take action fast enough when it comes to protecting their assets and their net worth. And COVID was such a good example of that, how many people sat there thinking they won't do it, they won't do it, they won't do it, and they did it. And I reckon it's going to be the same. It's like they won't do it, surely. It's just not going to be that bad. I reckon it will be. As they run out of money and they get desperate, what do the defaulting companies do? In liquidation, having been a lawyer in insolvency, they start collecting money wherever they can. So I think this is just a start. I think it'll be kind of increasing the temperature for the frog boiling in oil to make sure that the frog boils a little bit faster than before. I think this is the beginning. What do you think, Stephen?
100%. But they've already told you that it's the beginning. Jim Chalmers and Albo put it out there, and then there was about 4 different ministers all go out there and basically said they're going to come after, the family home. They're going to come after trusts. They're going to come after all these people that have been dodging tax forever, right? And then Albo spent 32 days backpedaling. So they've already told you what they're going to do. Albo threw 3 people under the bus because they told the truth, So they're coming after your money because they see it as easy target. The problem is politicians won't rein in their own spending, right? But they will rein in your hard-earned money, 100%, because it's easy. It's easy for them to grab it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think it's easy to do it because let's say you're an elite and it's how you think. It's like the good example was COVID with California. You had the absurdities about you cannot do this, you must stay home, you can't party. Meanwhile, Boris Johnson, Gavin Newsom, just go ahead, Nancy Pelosi, because really the truth is if you put them under hypnosis, they say, well, obviously the rules don't apply to us. I mean, we're the bosses who make the system. In all kind of feudalism history, the peasants do what they're told, but not the bosses. Like, why would we be like the Clintons. Like, why would we charge tax to our own people? We charge tax to our peasants, and that's how it works. So I think if you really put everyone under hypnosis, that's honestly how most politicians see it. You know, you get some decent ones, but the bulk of them, that's how they see it. And the truth is, Stephen, the scary thing is if you and I were in politics, without us knowing what we've been through, who knows, maybe we'd be the same.
I'd be worse. I'd be terrible.
Yeah, I probably would be worse.
Pol Pot had nothing on me.
I actually agree, because while you're sitting there, not there, it's easy to get annoyed and, oh my gosh, this is what's happening, we'd never do that. And you get in and go, well, we're not meeting our expenses. Yeah, look, just get it. Oh, screw it, we'll just get the money. Oh, they're complaining, this is just getting annoying. I can arrest them, just arrest them. It'd be so easy to do it.
Yes, and it is. And they're just, they're not even hiding what they're trying to do. They tell you exactly. Every time Labor or any government has done a low a low promise election, it means after the election they have got so much shit installed that they're going to come after, right? And they always do it. Have a look at Labor. So everything that Labor's got on the table at the moment, not one of them was taken to the election. Not one. Right? They said they weren't going to do this and weren't going to do that. And, we were just going to be basically the same as the previous coalition. Well, that's a load of shit, isn't it? And it's, the other thing is on one hand, they're building up bureaucracy so large with this voice and all this other crap that they're putting through. Well, it's got to be funded somehow. All right. And the easiest and pretty much the easiest and only way they can do it is by taking people's money.
Yeah.
Definitely. No, it's I mean, the writing's been on the wall. You guys have been talking about this, well, at least Warren, Stephen, I haven't known you as long as Warren, but Warren's been saying a lot of these clampdowns are really have, the last 5 years or so, he's been talking about things like this. But, with them introducing this new tax increase to the super accounts with 3 million, what does this specifically tell you about the Labor government and how they're thinking at the moment? And then just to add on to that, do you think things would have been the same if we had a Liberal government in power now?
So what it tells you about Labor is they're a lazy government, right? They don't want to change. And the reforms that are really needed, especially in our tax system, they don't want to go after, right? But they know that they've got to increase revenue. So this is a really simple sell, because what they do is they say it comes in after the next election. It's only going to be targeting those rich bastards that have got more than 3 million in their super, but it's not indexed. And when you have a look at some of the fine print that's coming out, it won't be long because what you got to remember is everyone keeps putting money in, right? So the younger generations now that are going to keep putting money in, they'll reach that 3 million mark a lot quicker than my generation would, because we started a lot later in the super system, right? So the younger generations that are starting work at 16, 17 and contributing to super, 18 and contributing to super, right? That is going to accelerate a lot quicker than, say, someone like me. Oh, excuse me. Go and get to bed. So it is just going to make it a bigger net. And Labor know. The Treasury figures tell you that's what it's going to do. There's no indexation. There's no compliance to it. Now, if they do that, now the worst part of this is, right, and the biggest wealth destroying factor is that it's on paper gains, not on cash gains, but on paper gains, right? And this is really important, because what it'll do is it means that if you don't have the cash in your portfolio, so you've got illiquid assets that have risen in value, right, you're going to have to pay tax on that gain. which means you're going to probably have to sell those assets. And that's just a disaster waiting to happen, right? Because it could create runs on the stock market. It could create mass property, especially in the property sector. If people have got a dump, and because it'll all happen at one point in time, like it'll all happen, probably March. I think that's when most of these would be due. So in February, March, you'll see a lot of people dumping assets. So the market will just drop off a cliff because they're going to have to pay their tax bill. So, yeah, and it's not a well thought out tax, and it just shows you they're lazy. Second part of your question, do I think that the Liberals, yes, but they wouldn't have done it in such a half-assed way, but yes, they would have done it at some point in time.
Yeah. And what about you, Warren? Are you on the same page as that, or anything else to add to that point?
Oh, pretty much. Look, we're kind of like two sides of the same bum, It's just, that's how I see it, It's basically very, very similar. I mean, Liberal would just do it in a very different way to Labor. I mean, Liberal are a little bit more wouldn't be quite as bad, I wouldn't think, whereas Labor's just a bit more obvious in what they're doing. But then in saying all that, as Stephen rightfully said, with a Liberal government, it becomes a lot harder to do. Liberals like restricting freedoms a lot more, whereas Labor are very concerned to make sure their own politicians can keep running their offshore companies, doing their foundations and trusts. So they'll hit the plebs harder, as they see it, but by and large, they're union cronies. I mean, just watch what Daniel Andrews is doing. It's extraordinary. He's just openly come out with the Corruption and Crime Commission and being like, well, I'm not going to say anything about it. In other words, he's basically saying, I can do whatever the heck I want, Our union groups and our different things, we don't account to that kind of stuff. That's not how I work. And then you see it with Mark McGowan and WA. I mean, all of them, it's like, that doesn't work for us. And that's kind of how Labor do it. So I honestly think with Super, it's easy. It's like, yeah, this is kind of like, yeah, once upon a time, it was like, it's our people's money. Now it's like, yeah, we'll let the people have the money. Because in true feudalism, when you study the Middle Ages, feudalism was, by and large, your lords own everything, but they let the peasants have a share. And that's how I see it. Like, even if you technically look at property rights, and Stephen would agree with me on this, allodial title is the only pure title. When you've got a freehold or crown title, you basically really say, the government saying, you can stay on the property ahead of everyone else, provided you recognise that we own you and we own the property. So that's the kind of system that we live in by and large. So, yeah, look, all I know is I don't trust very much at all. That's why I've been taking radical action on my own finances, on the structures that I'm setting up. And, yeah, look, basically making sure if you're hoping the government look after you with your finances, it's very similar to hoping the government will be nice to you as they were in COVID. And that's how I'm seeing the whole thing. I think the next 3 years, a lot's going to happen, possibly even the next 2 years. I don't know, Stephen, what you think about the time frame, but I think next 2 or 3 years, a lot will happen.
It's going to get worse over the next, sort of 2 or 3 years as they work it out. The next budget cycle, so not this election term, the next term, it'll wedge it. You'll end up with a really bad wedge because our spending, especially with like the submarine stuff that we've got, that's another, probably, $10-12 billion a year they've got to find. Plus the NDIS is going up. Plus their own wages are going up because they never ever go down. And so the spending's going this way, and revenue is going this way. So they've got to broaden the amount of revenue they're going to get, and it's only going to get worse and worse over the next few budget cycles.
Yeah, well, that kind of leads into the next point. From what I've seen online, obviously you see a lot of people commenting on a lot of these news articles and whatnot, and there seems to be a lot of people that say, well, it's only for people with a super of over $3 million. So it's kind of that, we'll put it in quotation marks, but tax the rich, right? Do you think it's really going to stop here, or can you see this kind of spreading into lower class supers or things outside of that? Is there a potential for the government to start reaching into different pockets like trusts and things like that? Or do you think this will stay to the higher kind of richer class with just supers?
Warren?
Yeah, cut out slightly. Can you say that again?
So online, you see a lot of people aren't too fussed about this because a lot of people kind of saying this is the typical, tax the rich type scenario. It's only supers over $3 million, right?
Yeah.
Can you see this as kind of the start of the government slowly starting to dip their fingers in different things? It kind of starts with this $3 million super, and before we know it, they're dipping into trusts of some sort with additional taxes. How do you see this kind of playing out from here?
Yeah, look, it's interesting. I just think that the way to see it is governments will keep doing things. Thomas Jefferson once said, the founding father in America, that governments will keep pushing the limits until you say stop. And the biggest issue that someone once said, like America, it was a brilliant speech by someone. In America, that's right, JP Sears, the comedian, did a brilliant video recently where he openly says, I was wrong on guns. And he actually showed a video 6 years ago where he's making fun of people who were patriots and saying they were stupid and he's saying, I was wrong. He said, the fact is the reason that we had the Second Amendment in America was because to make sure that the First Amendment got on it, which was like freedom of speech. He said the founding fathers knew the dangers and the evils of governments being able to push people. And he said that, as Jefferson and all the founding fathers said, governments will always push their limits until the people say stop. So the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms, in fact, he says, why was the government more limited what it could do in America? Because they had guns. Why in Australia could the government do what they wanted? He actually gave Australia as an example. Because they gave up their guns happily, and Australia have no whatsoever, totally at the mercy of the government. So for the government not to basically push bit by bit, number one, the only way that would happen is that one day the governments wake up and think, damn, we've been mean buggers here, Daniel Andrews, Mark McGowan, all the politicians go, no, this has been bad, man. Let's just start treating our people better. Let's just cut our expenses and live normally. Now, I don't know what you reckon and what Stephen reckons. I don't bank my chances very highly on that happen. I think the more likely scenario is that governments, as they get short of money, they'll just push in harder. Where can we go next? We'll go here. So maybe cut back the super limit. Maybe they won't. Maybe they'll just, bring in different company rates of taxes, I think the big one that they're likely to hit the most, if I was in charge of government, I'd be going after capital gains tax discounts. I think that's an easy sucker. It's an easy one. Remove the 50% discount. Say that it only favours the rich and you've got assets. The majority will agree with that, and it's an easy target. The family home one they might go after, but you're going to make a lot of money just by getting rid of the capital gains tax discounts. I think that's what you're going to go for. The 50% one, possibly even the business concessions, maybe even if they get desperate, the family home. Then if they really get desperate, they'll start hitting negative gearing and saying it favours the rich, and then they'll start hitting super and bring it back a little bit. That's my guess, if I had to think. But I think the likely thing they're going to hit is CGT discounts. I mean, what do you think, Stephen?
No, I think they'll do trusts first. I think the next thing that they'll do is they'll go, all these greedy bastards that have trusts have all these assets in it. So we're going to trust tax. We're going to trust taxes. We're going to tax trusts. Say that 3 times. We're going to tax trusts the same as companies. And I think that'll be that one of their next big things they'll go after. Then, as Warren said, CGT. One of the last things they'll do is the family home, right? But they will do it. What I think they will do is they will pretty much do a flat tax system that's not in the same spirit as a flat tax system. So basically what they'll say is, because they say, oh, you got all these capital gains concessions and all that sort of stuff. If you have a look around the world, most of the OECD nations don't tax capital gains. That's how the biggest windfall for American investors is there's no capital gains tax on a lot of stuff, and it's capped out at about 20%, right? It doesn't get added to your normal income. Right, which is a really, really, really big difference to Australia. So if you earn $100,000 and you make a $200,000 capital gain, well, that gets attached to your income rather than going, that's income tax and capital gains tax is a different number, which in America it's 20, it's at your income rate but capped at 20%. Right, and that's a huge saving. because pretty much if you make a $50,000 capital gain, most people earning 100 grand, that's pretty much going to push you into the top tax bracket straight away.
Yeah.
Right. You know, so all of a sudden, you don't have to make much of a capital gain in a year to be blowing right out. So I think they'll go, you know what, we're going to make all taxes to do with companies and trusts and capital gains. We're going to make all that 25% or all that 30%, right? And they'll probably go, we're going to make it all 25% because I'll say, oh, but look, it could have been higher, right? And the other thing that they do when they're talking is they talk about concessions. Oh, you're getting a tax break. Well, no, you're not. It's not a tax break. It's how the tax laws are written. There is no such thing as tax breaks. There is only how the law is written. And anyone who tells you it's a tax break is poor as fuck and has no idea. You play the game and you play by the rule book that is written by the people who are in charge. There's no such thing as tax breaks, right? Tax breaks for the rich or tax breaks for fossil fuels. There is no such thing. There is just a law that is written for that situation.
Yeah,
and
so go on, Steve. Sorry.
No, that's it. I'll finish now. Yeah.
Now, all I was going to say, I want to read something because one of the things I learned when I was involved in some very advanced underground off-the-grid movements many years ago was I was taught some powerful secrets which I've applied ever since. And I know people like you apply them without even necessarily, you probably do know you're doing it, but often they don't. The biggest thing I was taught by a guy who used to be very high level in government and that, who left it, he said, you got to understand that the biggest holder of land in the world is First Catholic Church. He said all the Western legal systems ultimately go back to the Holy Bible and things like that. So he took me back to that. And one of the interesting things he showed me, there's a very interesting scripture in the Bible where what it does is it talks about in Matthew, I think it's Matthew 17 in the Bible, where Jesus is asked, do you pay taxes? And he was asked, and his disciples were asked, does Jesus actually pay taxes? And Peter, his disciple, got a bit nervous and said, well, yeah, no, he does. Then as soon as he does, Jesus goes, why did he just tell them that I pay taxes? And Peter was like, oh, I don't know. And he goes, and he says a very powerful statement, which is what I applied in all my structuring. He says, so Peter, what on earth are you thinking, bro? He's saying, like, who do the Clintons, the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds charge tax? Do they charge it to Chelsea Clinton? Do they charge it to Bill Gates' daughter? Or do they charge it to all the citizens and the slaves? And he said, the slaves. He goes, okay, so therefore, the sons and daughters of God are free from taxes. Now, it's a very powerful statement. In other words, if you know who you are and that you're sovereign and you understand the system, it doesn't apply to you. So what are you saying? He said, but when you choose to submit yourself in servitude to that system, you got to do what you're told. He said the secret is to become sovereign. So it's one of the greatest statements you'll ever read about sovereignty. And I don't think I've ever heard a church teach on that, but pretty much Jesus said that you learn true sovereignty and how the system works, then you walk away from it. Whereas as soon as you're a slave, you're hoping the government doesn't do it to you. And like you're saying about a tax break, well, the idea was crazy, but what you're really saying is you have the right to play our game of Monopoly. We'll take whatever we feel like you as your lords. So it's kind of the biggest advertisement for sovereignty. Like you absolutely have to be sovereign. I mean, I love living in West Australia, being sovereign. I would not want to live in West Australia if I wasn't sovereign. And I think Peter's, Stephen, you're the same in Queensland. As a sovereign man, which I know you are, you're like, hey, this is cool. I bet you would be absolutely shitting yourself if you weren't sovereign, if you're right in the system, all your structure was in super, all your money was held by government, you'd be going like, holy moly, I'd better move my ass. Am I right?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. 100%, And the biggest problem is we live under a raft of legislation and laws that most of them are actually unjust in their writing and all that sort of stuff, right? But that doesn't mean that you can just opt out of the system and that sort of stuff, because you'll get yourself into worse trouble and all that. All these people that say, you go and set up these foundations, sovereign foundations and all that sort of stuff, and you just, write a letter and opt out of the system, are pretty much living in cuckoo land, right? Because you are still on the soil of another sovereign entity, right? So to become sovereign in that under that entity, right, you need to play by its rules, and then don't look at it as a single, right, a single area that you're working on. So if you have a look at the planet, there's 197 different sovereign nations, right, on the planet. 206 if you count, some of the protectorates that are, might as well be sovereign entities in their own right. So that gives you 197 different sets of sovereignty to work under, and 197 different sets of laws to work from. So you can then pick and choose and meld and sort of massage all those together to get the optimal level of what you want, right? And it's simple things like the old saying, "Don't keep all your eggs in one basket." And people that had 100% of their savings in sovereign bank, in Silicon Valley Bank and Signature and Voyager and all that sort of stuff over the last weekend, soon found out that all of a sudden it can disappear, and then be hard to get to. That's because you're living under that rule and that I'm trying to think of the name, the dominion. So you're placing yourself in one dominion.
Yeah. So you both mentioned there in both of what you were saying that there's a big importance on actually being sovereign and not like you said, Stephen, not the wishy-washy version in cuckoo land, but being a sovereign individual. So one thing you mentioned just then was not having all your eggs in one basket. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that? And we'll start with you, Stephen, and we'll move to Warren. What steps would you be taking as an individual to be moving in the right way with the way that things are going in Australia right now?
So the first one is understand what we're talking about with what is sovereign, right? And in my view, it's three pillars, three things. It's personal responsibility, right? I am me. The buck stops with me. I have to be educated. I have to take ownership of what I do. The second one is financial independence, creating streams of income that mean that you are not tied to just one stream, one entity, one dominion, one employer. So you're not slave to one thing. And the third one is legacy, helping your fellow man, passing on what you've learned, increasing your own knowledge, right? Being known and being wanted to is what you want to be known for, what you want to leave behind, and what you want to move on to future generations. So once you understand that if you work to those sort of three pillars, and there is variance on those, but the two very critical ones are your own financial independence and your own personal responsibility. Before you do anything else, unless you are living by those two rules, right, you can't go on. You can say, what steps do you take? Biggest steps to take is those. Own up, say, I am personally responsible for my own situation.
Yeah.
You can't solve a problem if you don't know and take responsibility that there is a problem to start with. Right? So once you do that, then it's the simple steps about getting educated, working out what your goals and priorities and everything are, because everyone's journey is different. Everyone's journey is different, right? Yeah. I have a bigger journey in my mind where I've probably got a larger proportion of charity in my structures and my being than the average person. I'm at 70% plus goes to charity. Right. So I'm at very, very high end of all that. Right.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that it's going out. It just means that that's where it's all ending. I'm using as little as possible of what I'm making and what I'm creating, right, to be a legacy. Right. So I'm really where if you go by the churches, it's 10% tied, right? Yeah. And when they talk about a lot of it in the scriptures, they really don't mention tax. Tax is a modern construct. Right?
Yes. Yes.
A lot of it is because you were not seen as a human being, you were seen as property. It was your what you had to pay the masters to live. Right? It was the tide of what you had to give to your masters, your being or whoever that you served. Right? There's another part of the Bible, I can never remember where it is, that says, if you're going to be a slave, be the best slave that you can be.
Yes.
Right? And
Agreed.
so that means that you are producing the most for your master, that you're giving the most to master to be given a favoured time to possibly be free. Right?
Yeah.
The ones that we're just always doing the bare minimum, we're never, ever going to be free, never, ever going to be their own master or their own sovereign. So you have to be at the next level. You have to be the slave that you can be. And we're all slaves. There is none of us on this planet that aren't a slave. All right, we're a slave to something, some people it's, drugs, alcohol, sex, whatever. Some people it's money, some people it's narcissism, some people it's politics, but we're all a slave to something.
Yeah.
And once you believe that, one of the other biggest problems that we have in society today is there's not a lot of people that actually have a grounding in some sort of faith. And I don't care what it is. You might believe in, the toilet paper god, or you might believe in whatever, but you have some sort of faith in being. It's amazing how many times I've sat down and spoken with people that say that they're atheists, but they all have a moral code. And I say, well, you can't be an atheist if you follow a moral code that's embedded in Judeo-Christianity, right? That is centuries old, and it does their head in. What most people that say that they're an atheist, what they really mean is, one, that they saw it on TikTok and thought it was a fucking great idea, which means that they're a slave in a bigger way, or two, right, they don't like the corporatism of modern religion.
Yes.
Right? And if you don't have a faith and a moral code that you stick by, you pretty much cannot be sovereign. Because I think, Warren, you did this at one of the events that we did, is it's God, man, the system.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So we are always, doesn't matter what your God is, a God could be a goat or a statue in the park. Whatever your God is always above you, your faith, your whatever. So you have to have something above you, right, to become sovereign too. Right? The system is structured by man, right? Yeah. So the system should always be below you.
Yeah, that's what I love with
these. Yeah, these are really the first steps that you need to take. And I know it's what a lot of people don't want to hear. They want to hear that, give me the quick 10-step thing. But it's really, when I've been doing a lot of my one-on-one mentoring, and when I've been dealing with a lot of high net worth individuals, it's amazing how many of them have solid families, solid values. They have a 50-year plan, right? And they have a strong faith and belief.
I remember one of my favourite statements, Stephen. I was fortunate in that growing up, teenagers, I grew up in a very, very brilliant churches. Back when churches were less corporatized and more powerful and teaching about New World Order. And I still remember a great pastor once said. He said, a truly humble man of God, a woman of God or whatever, he said, is bold as a lion before mankind, humble and broken before mighty God and higher powers. And that's like my own inner mantra. Like when COVID was going on, I remember saying to my sons when the mask mandates came in, and they were nervous. So I said to them, I'll never bow before government who dares to do this. I said, it goes against my morals. I said, I will fight. I said, I'm scared, but I said, I will stand my ground and I will fight with a viciousness like a lion. But I said, but before God, I'm broken, and ask every day, help me, give me the strength to get through this and serve and help as many people as I can. So in other words, in my mind, I agree with you. Like I'm total slave to God, to the higher councils. And every day I say, I am totally at your service. Just guide me in my business, guide me in my work. I have my own understanding from what I've seen in that, but I agree with you totally. I mean, some of the greatest people I've met as clients are Hindus who have really got a very, very strong faith. I've met some amazing I've got a Taoist client who's so switched on. I've got other people like that. And it's just having a strong basis. It goes back to an almighty God, a creator, however that happens to play out and look. And it's interesting that the Australian Foundations Law has acknowledged that. They say that they will approve you as a religion without any issue, but you just have to show that you have a moral code of beliefs, number one, and you must also show a belief in an almighty God of some kind. And I remember the Scientology case of the High Court in 1979, when they tried to challenge them, and Justice Murphy said, you've got no right to come in here, Mr. Tax Office and Mr. Tax Office, and tell these people what their religion should be. That's none of your business. Do they believe in an almighty God? There's a church called the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster, and you can find it on Google, which actually teach for the spaghetti monster. I've got clients who set up the Church of Mother Ayahuasca. There's a Church of the Cannabis, I've had clients get that approved, In other words, but the advantage of a moral code is as well as giving you stability in your life. And I see that with James and Edward, like you've seen them as such secure, young men, but they have a strong moral code. They have a strong relationship with, with God as they understand God. I mean, James will tell you when he had very bad eczema, it was a mixture of good eating, but also daily prayer and reminder that God was his healer, And both this kind of faith, like all through COVID, I never had any doubt I'd get through it unscathed because I had that strong sense that I know that if I serve people, I'll be looked after. I knew that within my core. And I don't like corporatized religion. I hate it. I think it's stupid. I've seen it. I've been in it. I've hated what's happened the last 30 years, how I've seen magnificent churches, like a good example is Hillsong. 30 years ago, I used to go to their conferences. I knew Brian. I met many of the guys. I love these guys. I saw the difference they made in my life. They made a massive difference. They taught me good stuff. They were great examples for me. And I've seen that church turn into this corporate monster. And it's been sad to see it from a church that had a big, big impact on my life, And I think that society, there's a very good book by Ken Wilber called The Religion of Tomorrow, where he actually says that the world is crying out for a much more holistic, conscious, less judgmental religion that is inclusive and helps people to grow. Because he said the current religions are stuck in the old dark ages at the moment. They've gone back to that very dark age and they've lost their sense of identity. And a good example to me was you see Scott Morrison, like a man who claimed to be this, and then he actually lost all his sense of values. He just kept changing and chopping. But at least why I can live with Mark McGowan as my premier is at least he has a clear standard and he never deviates. I don't agree with half the stuff he does, but at least he sticks to what he says he's going to stick to, and I can live with that, And I think that we've got to get back to our sense of morals and identity, and it gives you strength in everything you do. You become a philanthropist. In fact, when you read the original Bible, it encourages prosperity. It says a sign that you are spiritual is that you're prosperous. That's actually a sign of God's blessing, that you're prosperous. And that when you lost that moral code, it says you'll be cursed with poverty. So it's interesting. It's the reverse to what people get taught. It says that the sign of the blessing of God is that you're prosperous. It's a sign that you're in alignment with your path. And anyway, that's just my little rant.
Yeah. So to answer your question is absolutely. Get yourself. A lot of it's more about you. First. Your real initial steps is about you, and then working out from that what you want to achieve and what you want to leave behind, and that sort of stuff. And some of the best clients that I've ever worked with have been Orthodox Jews who really have, this tunnel vision of it. And they teach, and create whole ecosystems around, what they do, because it's all integrated between, if they keep helping other Jewish businesses out. And the Italians are pretty good at this as well, mainly in the mafia. But it's the same thing, is they all go to the same businesses and the same families, because then they help the underlying communities, right? And you've got to realise that it's only since the probably the early 1900s, if you wanted to give a date, probably 1911, 1913, when the big changes to government happened. But before that, government was so small in charity, it wasn't funny. That's why we have the great institutions of the world that are all named after people, is because it was their wealth and their spirit and their drive that created all these institutions around the world. It was charity that did that, not government. And that's what we've got away from, right? And that creates sovereignty, because then you take the power away from government.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Too many people nowadays are giving all their power to government. So
that was a really little powerful segment we had there. And interestingly, Stephen, I remember when you were doing a presentation for the Wealth Mastery on goal setting, and the way you talk about sovereignty there is very similar in that sense. It's more about what's that overarching vision, what is that one thing that's guiding you? Because once you figure that out, it's a lot easier to get those micro steps. And just for a quick recap, what were the three pillars that you mentioned? One was personal sovereignty, and what were the other two?
Personal responsibility, financial independence, and legacy.
Perfect. Good takeaways for the people listening. Now, we'll keep moving on and obviously come back to kind of the super question, a bit more of the tangible steps. And Warren, I think this would be a good one for you to start off with. What are your opinions, and we'll stress opinion, not financial advice in any means, on keeping your money outside of things like super, some alternatives to that, whether that's trusts, foundations, or any other types of kind of vehicle you might be able to hold assets in? What are your thoughts on that?
So in terms of other vehicles apart from super, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, look, I had virtually nothing. I mean, according to the system right now, where I'm at, I should be smashing my money into super, because I'm in my 50s. It's like perfect time, and I am not going near it. And why is that? Because I do not trust it as far as I can throw it. I really, 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 really don't. I'm a big lover of foundations. Number one, because as Stephen said, I like giving back to people. And what I generally find with wealthy people, like Stephen's a good example, wealthy people are always giving, because as you start making more and more money, there's only so much you can do with it. Like only so many cars you can buy, many yachts you can do. That's why, even Gates and the Clintons, eventually they start doing some philanthropy, even though it may involve experimenting on people as a bit of a favor for them. But by and large, in saying that, a lot of these guys do some genuine philanthropy, and the more money you make. So I always think the starting point, if you've really got money, is that most clients who come to me who say, well, I don't really do philanthropy, when I talk to them, I normally find they actually are. I mean, I had a client come to me recently who runs a health network marketing business, makes a huge income. And I said, I don't believe that you don't do philanthropy. I said, there's no way someone like you, who's as kind as you are. And then she said, actually, you're right. I do lots of women empowerment seminars, and I help spiritually and mentally empower women. I do lots of free stuff for the community. I said, there you go. You're doing philanthropy. Generally, people who don't have much money don't have time for philanthropy, because they've got to put food on the table, pay their mortgages, keep the system and the beast going, And so I always I reckon foundations are a good structure. I love offshore structures, not for tax minimisation in Australia, because Stephen would agree, I don't really solve that problem. But a lot of people what they don't get is that, let's say that the Australian government, things go really bad. And is it possible? Well, it's possible. And governments just go worse than any of us could imagine. I mean, is that feasible? What we saw in COVID. I mean, some of the things that were done I think Stephen and I have admitted we got shocked, and we don't get shocked by much with how bad Melbourne got and how little people pushed back. I mean, I was speechless with Melbourne. So I think it's going to happen in Australia. I think we're going to do some stuff that people will be speechless. And having an offshore nest egg is a really good idea. You know, years ago, I read a book called The Invisible World by Lance Spicer. I don't know if, Steve, you come across him, but Lance Spicer was a great teacher.
Yeah.
And he used to always say, you know, use offshore structures, not just for tax minimisation, because it often you can't so much, use it to hold and develop an offshore nest egg. So that if the crap hits the fan, I mean, Putin's oligarchs, most of them were really very minimally affected by the sanctions because they had second passports, they had offshore structures, they had another world set up in case it happened. And so when they got hit, they were actually able to get on with life, you know, and they were to thank their lucky stars that they'd spent all that money, you know, on insurance and getting second passports, second citizenships and all that, but saved their ass. So the reason you do most of that is not necessarily because it's going to save you a lot of tax, is you're doing it to save your ass. And when people say that's a lot of money, I'm like, well, every year I pay my car insurance, I cringe when I get the large bill and I pay it. When I've had my crashes, I sit there giving thanks to God, but I paid it. So you don't do asset protection and offshore structuring, settled citizenship to basically make money. I mean, I don't know what figure you were taught, Stephen, but I was taught in my high net worth seminars that you should be willing to spend, I think, 3 to 5% of your money purely in insurance and protection to make sure your wealth doesn't get taken. So if you've got 10 million, you should be willing to spend up to $500,000 to get everything secured. That's been what I was taught.
Yeah. So if you have a look at family offices spend anywhere between 3 and 5% every year maintaining their family office and all their structures and insurances and that. Now, when we're talking about insurances in this world, we're not necessarily talking about you going and buying an insurance coverage, but it could be creating, you know, your own insurance around stuff. Simple things like you might offset some stuff against inflation and that from gold or precious metals. It might be that you set up a reinsurance fund and turn an expense into an asset, right? And then take it away as being a liability every month and then turn it into an asset. And the wealthy have all these different tools at their advantage because they are playing a different game. Right? They're on, if you think of it like a helix and spiraling up, as your journey in this world goes, you'll start off down the bottom, learning, getting comfortable and getting up, and then the world opens to you as you go up. And it's like a cone, right? You start off with little knowledge and you get more and more and more and more and more and more, and it just keeps spiraling up. So,
yeah. One of the things I want to say, in fact, I made a bit of a promise to myself, Stephen, you might find this intriguing this morning when I was going to do this. And the promise was, I remember before COVID and even when it was happening, although I was straight, I was a little bit held back. So I didn't want to be seen as a prophet of doom. I just didn't want that label. And I made a promise to myself tonight. I thought, I'm going to speak exactly how I feel on the issues and what I really see. And if it means I sound like a prophet of doom, you know, I'm going to say that. And yeah, and one of the things I am, you know, convinced about is I don't think people take enough action and take stretch seriously enough. Like a good example here. Look, this honestly isn't singling out. It's just giving it. It's a good example. Like someone said, don't you need a lot of money for offshore structure? My honest answer to that is you're sure going to need a lot of money when your money gets taken off you because you've got absolutely no protection when you wake up and your $1 or $2 million in Australia is now pretty much completely frozen, or unless you agree to get your climate change thing or I don't know, whatever the fuck someone makes up, then you'll be sitting there thinking it'll cost you even more. So the biggest mistake we make is doesn't it cost us a lot of money? That's not the mistake. I'm not saying you go and spend money you don't need, but sometimes the cheapest money you spend is a lot of money to set yourself up properly. And I find I set up a lot of money to get myself set up properly. I know I've got wealthy clients who spend a lot of money. There was a study done in 2016 by Peter Martin. We found the average wealthy person of the top 56 Australian spent on average 1.7 million alone in just purely their tax advisors before they spent anything else per year. 1.7 million of the top people. They know how the game works. So look, if you don't have much money at all, then that's fine. There's two ways you go. don't have much money, you need to worry about it. If you've got money, just do whatever it takes to make sure you're protected. You have an offshore nest egg and onshore and everything. Now, that's just my position on it. Some may think differently, at least, and and if you don't want to do that, but at least own the fact that it's a form of insurance you're taking. Like some people don't take every insurance, just own the fact you say to yourself, I'm going to take my chances and hope it doesn't get as bad as you say it's going to get. And it's like, I may not get car insurance this year because I hope I don't crash my car. And maybe, and most likely I won't crash my car. But if I do, I'll be glad I've got it. So just make sure you make an informed, considered assessment, Do you really think it's, my honest view is I think that there's a real risk that Australian governments and world governments are going to go pretty rogue over the next 2 years. The book, The Sovereign Individual, written in 1995, predicted governments would go rogue. I think it's worth setting up some structures, we're having some pain to set up structure properly, get you well protected, because every single high net worth person I deal with, that's what they've been doing. So that's just my take. What do you think, Steve? That's my take on it.
Yeah, 100%. If you have a look at what's happening around the world, everything runs in cycles, right? So massive cycles on everything. We've probably got 3 or 4 cycles that are all converging together, which means we're coming to the end of a mega cycle. And I see that as trust in government, lowest it's ever been, right? Governments, then reacting to that. So government interference is nearly the highest it's ever been. The movement of empires throughout our little blue planet, the empire is ending in the US and it's moving into Asia, right? We've got another cycle on society. Society in the West is breaking down faster now than it's ever done before. So you got all these things coming together that are going to create the opportunity for chaos, right? And that opportunity for chaos is also the opportunity for prosperity, because out of chaos comes the next reign of prosperity. But you can't take advantage of that prosperity unless you're ready to take that leap.
Agree. And look, I think the secret to the night is just own where you're at. Look, if you're still really in the system, you've got to do things in stages, okay? It's just getting going and just realising the risks and thinking, what can I do to manage the risks, What can I do to at least manage my risks without necessarily going crazy in paranoid fear? I mean, I don't live in paranoid fear. I mean, I live a good life. I've got some money in the system. I've got some money outside the system. I accept the fact that if things happen without me expecting it, there'll be some losses, but at the end of the day, at least I'm happy with what I've done. I've put in enough structures and enough things in place to protect my wealth to the best of my ability today. And that's all you can really do. Just make sure whatever actions you take is an informed decision. I do think that the next few years of a Labor government, there's going to be a lot happen. And I agree with Stephen. I think good chance they'll target trusts. And I do think they're going to target CGT discounts. I think it's going to be very hard not to do that. That's my feeling. Or at least they'll cap it. At least they'll limit it. Like if you're over a certain net worth, you can't get it or something like that.
Yeah. And they will... if you have a look at what the politicians are doing, is they're running populism, right? So those that have already elected to become slaves to the system are the ones that think that they're getting the most out of the system, right? Because the government is giving them something. This stupid talk that's raising its head again about the living wage, right? And all that sort of stuff. Fuck, a living wage... I forget what it was. It's like $1,100 or $1,200 a month, right? That's not a living wage, especially in a place like Australia, right? Where we're one of the most expensive countries in the world to live at the moment. Everything is moving out of control really quickly. And governments don't have an answer for this. So they'll keep tending those that support them the most. And those that don't will get hammered the most. Right. So and Warren's right. So if you're looking for 3 concrete steps from tonight to go and do, 1, go and have a good hard look and think about yourself, your goals, your purpose, and all that sort of stuff. Take stock of where your current wealth is, right? And then start to learn the game. All right, go and reach out, have a look at the stuff on the Global Wealth Club and all that sort of stuff, and start to understand that you have to think different. Now, understanding yourself is a really, really big one. And then understanding the game and where you can fit into that game is what will come out of doing those steps.
So really, really powerful advice, Stephen. And I know those are some steps that I got from Warren a long time ago. And obviously you've drilled that into me from a lot of the conversations. And I think you guys are really head on. And Stephen, I'm sure you can attest for this, but the people that we always see really getting the results in the club are the people that are just kind of taking action and are clear on the direction they want to head. So some really sound advice there. Now, Warren, in terms of, structures outside of super, I know this is something you've been inundated with over the last month, really, since they kind of announced that they were increasing this. So what you've actually planned is to put together an online training on some different structures and how you could potentially look to diversify and protect things like your super, your savings and your assets from the government. So can you just share a little bit more about that and what you'll be teaching?
Yes, no, look, we're going to be doing an event because we're getting a lot of requests about it. And like the biggest thing of the Global Wealth Club is to empower people. And so how I've decided to empower people is we're going to do an event that really teaches people different structures. So we're going to be teaching on companies, trusts, super and foundations. So all that. We're not going to cover offshore structures in this event. That'll be another one. But we're going to cover all these ones. So Australian foundations, Australian super. So it's really going to be helping people who are basically Australian, so to speak, to set up structures. So it's going to be really genuinely brilliant content, so to speak. So yeah, that's got to be the event. So we're covering a bit of everything. Companies, we're going to cover trust in the future, self-managed super, and then we're going to cover foundations.
The worst entity that you can use is your own private name. Right? The worst entity that you can use is your own private name. The first thing that you should do in any wealth protection scenario is separate yourself, right, to your assets. And that's why the wealthy use entities. One of the things is knowing the game is knowing the vehicles that the game is played on. Like, you don't go to the horse races and try to win the Melbourne Cup on a push bike, right? You take a bloody horse, and a good one. You don't go to the V8 supercars with a horse. You go with a V8 supercar, right? You don't go to the AFL and play with a round ball and only use your feet. So know the sport, know the game that you're playing. They all have rules, right? And they all have vehicles, and they all have tools, and they all have language that you need to know.
Well said, Stephen. And just to clarify for everyone, we've posted the link if you are interested in coming along to that online event. There is a price point for people that aren't members. For the members that are here now, this is actually included as part of your membership, just to clarify with you. So if you're a member and you would like to come, just shoot our support team an email and we'll put you down, reserve a spot, and then add you to the list for all the email outs.
If you paid member,
yeah. Do either of you have any final thoughts for today before we wrap up?
Yeah, and so it goes back to the action thing. Is micro action is better than no action.
Yeah. Bad
action is better than no action. And I had a third one, and I've just forgotten it. What was it? Micro action is better than no action. Bad action is better than no action. And failure is an action. Right?
Yeah.
So pretty much all the mentors and all the entrepreneurs that I've ever worked with and all the big business owners that I've ever worked with have all failed. All of them. There has never, ever been a person that has truly succeeded in life without failing. Edison, 10,000 ways to make a light bulb. Nikola Tesla, had the most patents of any man alive during his time and died broke, poor, and mentally disturbed. Yeah. Right. So you're going to have some sort of failure, but you can reduce the amount of failure. You can reduce the amount of time it takes you to get somewhere by working with people. The best sportsmen in the world, right, have coaches. The best businessmen in the world have mentors. If you have a look at a lot of societies, you are as a person, you are mentored by an elder above you, right? In the Western world, we've forgotten those trends, those traditions. Broken homes and all this garbage around. Women can do without men and men can do without women, and all this sort of bullshit that has been sprouted around doesn't happen. It means you've got a failed society. So go back and just take one small step on doing something. So
love that, mate. How about you, Warren? Any final thoughts for today?
No, I think Stephen put it so well. It's hard to beat that. I think that actions. Look, what my biggest thing I said to someone when they asked me about how I felt, I was asked actually by someone a little while ago, about doing the best that I could. How would you go, Warren, if you basically could change anything in your life? Do you have any regrets? I said, actually, hardly any, because I said, at least I gave things a try. I made a crap load of failures, but I bloomin' tried, When I lost my partner and she died, I made a promise to myself, I want to keep going with life and I want to give it a try. I'm going to deal with this. I'm going to get the best grief counsellor. I went overseas. I met some different girls online, and someone said to me, it didn't really work out. I said, they didn't, but at least I gave it a try, And business stuff, I gave things a try. I've had far more business and investment values than I've had successes, But yeah, I'm always look back on my life and I'm proud of myself because I just gave things a shot. I just tried things. And, I said this to someone, I would lose no sleep. If the Great Reset happened unexpectedly, I got badly caught out, obviously I'd be annoyed, I'd be upset, but at least I thought I'd done everything that I could. I know enough skills. I've won the game of life more times now these days than I've lost. I have no doubt in whatever new system came up, I'd find a way to succeed very quickly, So it's always better to take action and fuck it up than it is to do nothing. I couldn't agree with Stephen more. I hate being procrastinating and I hate indecisions. I've taken actions, and many times I've taken actions and go, what have you just done, Warren? That was a dumb thing to do. And then I laugh about it and I'm like, okay, well, I better retract myself quickly. That was a stupid thing that you just did. And I do stupid things regularly.
And that's exactly right. One of my mentors, and a really elderly gentleman, been in the business world for ever and a day. And he used to always say to me, he goes, if you make no decision, right, you'll never go anywhere. He said, but if you make bad decisions, eventually you'll make a good one. Right. But, and when you think about it, it's like, okay, I'll make bad decisions, but I'll learn and make a good one, but I'm moving ahead. And that. The biggest, the one that I always love when you look at this sort of stuff is Elon Musk, right? He failed and failed and failed to put SpaceX in the air, the rocket in the air. The last attempt, the last dollar, right? Success. Tesla. The amount of times Tesla's nearly been to the wall, right, is just phenomenal, but he keeps going. Richard Branson with Virgin. The very first time that they put a plane in the sky, they blew an engine. Right? That's $2 million engine blew up. Right? And then they had to beg Boris Steele to put the plane back in the sky. So protecting your wealth, but not only that. And the other thing I'll just say is, when we're talking about steps to become sovereign, financial independence is a big one as well, because I've never met a truly sovereign person that was tied to a 9-to-5 job. And that is, now some of them have held 9-to-5 jobs. Like I know a woman in Sydney who the only job she's ever had is working at McDonald's. But she is one of the most wealthiest property people that you'll ever know. She has hundreds of apartments and properties around New South Wales. And she's only ever worked in McDonald's. But she took the financial independence thing seriously and created her own wealth. She doesn't have to go to McDonald's. She doesn't have to work. No, she's one of the very senior managers now. But she does it because that gives her something to do and drive, and she meets people, she loves it, and that sort of stuff. But she took it out and created the stream alongside. Right. So when I say that I've never met a person that's worked a 9-to-5 job, I mean that's the only thing they do. They work a 9-to-5 job and don't do anything else.
Well, I'm sure there's a lot of people in the audience here, but thank you both for taking the time today and giving your insights, both around, the specific of super, but also from more of a broader perspective on how to view these things and kind of set yourself on the right path. Because I think sometimes people think that, it's a specific step or, some specific thing they need to do. But, it's pretty clear talking to both of you. It's a lot about how you view things and the direction you're going to take, and really just taking action, even if you don't have those specifics laid out. So I just want to say a personal thank you to you both for taking the time to share your expertise and your experience today.
Yeah, not a problem. I'm glad glad people turn up. If people didn't turn up to this sort of stuff, I wouldn't do it. So.
No,
absolutely.
I appreciate the people that turn up, and no doubt it'll go on. There are people listening on YouTube and other things like that. So yeah, look, I encourage you all for showing up. Well done for that. It's good. Just now make sure you do some kind of action, even if small. That's my last word.
Absolutely. All right. We're going to wrap it up for today. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. The replay, we'll have some clips on YouTube, no doubt. Stephen, Warren, thanks again for your time. Enjoy the rest of your night. And I'm sure we'll be seeing everyone sometime over the next month in another webinar.
Yep. And I'm hoping to see everyone here at the event. If you're a paid member, you definitely want to be there. If you're not, then pay up and join the event or become a member. That's my comment.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
All right.
And we all
thanks, everyone.
Balls in front of his face.
Exactly. Yeah.
Normally people have to pay a bit more for that, but today it's free.
I'm going to go play with my balls now and leave you guys alone.
Exactly.
It's definitely time to end the webinar now then.
Okay. See you later.
See you later, everyone.